Why every major religion describes encounters with radiant beings. Stop scrolling for just a moment and ask yourself this. Why do completely different religions, separated by thousands of miles and centuries of history, all describe the exact same phenomenon? Beings made of pure light, messengers that appear in humanity's most critical moments, entities that transcend physical reality and bridge the gap between human and divine. This isn't mythology, this is documented spiritual reality across every major faith tradition. And what you're about to discover might completely shift how you understand your own spiritual journey. Think about the most pivotal moments in religious history. When Mary received the news that would change Christianity forever, who appeared? A radiant being of light named Gabriel. When Muhammad was chosen to receive divine revelation, who came to him in that cave? The same Gabriel, known as Jibril in Arabic, emanating such powerful energy that the prophet was physically overwhelmed. And thousands of years before either event, ancient Hindu texts described devas, celestial beings of light, who served as intermediaries between cosmic consciousness and human awareness. These aren't just similar stories. They're identical patterns showing up across cultures that had zero contact with each other. The Vedic scriptures describe beings who glow with inner fire, who move between dimensions, who deliver sacred knowledge that transforms entire civilizations. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly what angels do in Christianity and what malaika do in Islam. Same mission, same appearance, same transformative power. Here's what makes this even more fascinating. These beings don't just show up randomly. They appear when humanity needs a consciousness upgrade, when we're ready for the next level of spiritual evolution, when old systems are breaking down and new understanding needs to emerge. Gabriel announcing Jesus wasn't just a birth announcement, it was the introduction of radical compassion into a brutal world. Jibril transmitting the Quran wasn't just religious instruction, it was a complete restructuring of Arabian society. The devas sharing Vedic wisdom wasn't just philosophy, it was cosmic science encoded for human understanding. Right now, take 3 deep breaths and feel into this. What if you've been limiting your spiritual potential by staying inside only one tradition's framework? What if the truth is so much bigger, so much more magnificent than any single religion could capture? These luminous beings might be trying to show us something profound, that we're all climbing the same mountain, just starting from different sides. Drop the word unity in the comments if this resonates. Have you ever felt a spiritual presence you couldn't explain? Hit that like button if you're ready to explore deeper how ancient texts prove these light beings share identical characteristics. Let's talk about something religious institutions rarely address: the uncomfortable similarities between their sacred beings. Because when you actually compare the descriptions across Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, you find details so specific, so identical, that coincidence becomes impossible to accept. And these details reveal something that could revolutionize how you approach your entire spiritual practice. Start with appearance. Christian scripture describes angels as beings of overwhelming brightness, sometimes with multiple wings, eyes of fire, voices like thunder. The book of Daniel says Gabriel's appearance was like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze. Now compare that to Islamic descriptions of Jibril. He appeared to Muhammad with wings spanning the horizon, radiating light so intense it hurt to look at directly, with a presence that filled the entire sky. And in Hindu texts, devas are described with divine radiance, tejas, that makes them impossible to look at directly, often depicted with multiple arms representing their multidimensional power, surrounded by halos of pure energy. But it goes deeper than appearance. Look at their functions. In Christianity, angels deliver divine messages, protect humanity, record our deeds, and execute God's will. In Islam, different angels have specialized roles. Jibril brings revelation, controls natural forces, Israfil will sound the trumpet, Azrael oversees death. In Hinduism, devas manage cosmic forces, Indra governs weather and war, Agni controls sacred fire, Varuna oversees cosmic order. Different names, identical job descriptions. Here's where it gets really interesting. All three traditions describe these beings as existing in hierarchies. Christianity has archangels, cherubim, seraphim, 9 orders of celestial beings. Islam describes ranks of angels with specific duties and levels of proximity to the divine. Hinduism details an entire cosmology of devas, from lower nature spirits to high deities, all part of one interconnected system. Why would completely independent religions develop the exact same organizational structure for the spirit world? And they all agree on this. These beings operate beyond time and space as we know it. They can appear and disappear instantly. They can take physical form or remain invisible. They respond to prayer, meditation, and sincere spiritual seeking. Most importantly, they serve as teachers, awakening humans to truths we couldn't discover alone. What if these similarities exist because we're all describing the same reality? What if the differences are just cultural translations of universal spiritual truth? Comment awakening if you're starting to see the connections. What tradition were you raised in? And does this perspective challenge or expand it? Show some love with that like button. What happens when you recognize the universal pattern behind all spiritual experiences? Here's the part that changes everything. Once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. And more importantly, you can start working with it. Because if these luminous beings are real, if they're universal rather than exclusive to one religion, then that means you have access to this guidance regardless of which spiritual tradition you were born into. Let that sink in for a second. Your spiritual potential just became limitless. Consider what this means practically. A Christian praying to guardian angels, a Muslim seeking protection from malaika, and a Hindu meditating on their Ishta Devata are all doing the exact same thing, establishing conscious connection with benevolent spiritual forces that exist to support human evolution. The method might look different, but the mechanics are identical. You're raising your vibration, opening your awareness, and inviting divine assistance into your life. This isn't about abandoning your tradition. It's about understanding it more deeply by seeing its connection to the universal spiritual infrastructure that all traditions tap into. When you pray the rosary, you're using a technology that works. When you perform Sala 5 times daily, you're activating a connection that's real. When you chant mantras, you're vibrating at frequencies that align with higher consciousness. All roads lead to the same destination. And here's what the mystics of every tradition discovered. These beings respond to sincerity, not dogma. They don't care if you use the right religious vocabulary. They respond to the purity of your intention, the openness of your heart, the genuine desire to grow spiritually. Saint Teresa of Avila had the same type of ecstatic visions that Sufi masters experienced, that Hindu bhaktas described. Different languages, same experience. Modern research into consciousness is finally catching up to what ancient wisdom always knew. Studies of meditation show practitioners from all traditions accessing similar states of expanded awareness. Near-death experiences reveal the same beings of light regardless of the person's religious background. Even quantum physics is suggesting that consciousness might be fundamental to reality, exactly what these spiritual traditions have been saying all along. So what do you do with this information? You start experimenting. You take the best practices from multiple traditions and see what works for you. You recognize that spiritual truth is bigger than any single system can contain. Type expansion. If this is opening new possibilities for your spiritual practice. Which traditions' practices have you been curious about trying? Drop that like if you're ready for more truth. How to actually connect with these beings of light in your daily life. Everything we've explored leads to this moment. How do you actually establish contact with these luminous guides? Because knowing they exist across all traditions means nothing if you can't access that guidance yourself. And the beautiful truth is that it's simpler than you think. These beings are already reaching toward you. You just need to learn how to reach back. First, understand this. Every spiritual tradition develops specific techniques for connecting with higher consciousness, and they all work because they're based on universal principles. Christians use contemplative prayer and Lectio Divina. Muslims practice dhikr and muraqabah. Hindus employ various forms of yoga and meditation. Different packaging, identical core quieting the mental noise, elevating your frequency and opening to receive. Start with what resonates most naturally with you. But don't be afraid to cross-pollinate. Try this tonight. Create a quiet space. Light a candle representing divine light, and spend 10 minutes in silence with the simple intention of being open to guidance. No elaborate ritual needed, just sincerity. Notice what thoughts arise, what feelings emerge, what insights drop in. These beings communicate through intuition, synchronicity, dreams, and those sudden moments of clarity that feel like they came from beyond your normal thinking. Pay attention to patterns. When you keep seeing the same numbers, encountering the same symbols, or having the same theme show up repeatedly, that's communication. When you think of someone and they immediately call, that's interconnected consciousness at work. When you have a dream that feels more real than waking life, that might be actual contact with these dimensions of light. The secret every mystic discovers eventually is this: the separation between human and divine isn't nearly as vast as we've been taught. These beings of light aren't distant, unreachable forces. They're collaborators in consciousness evolution. They're waiting for humanity to remember what we've always been: spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. And when enough people wake up to this truth, when enough of us start recognizing that all our traditions are fingers pointing at the same moon, something remarkable happens. We stop fighting about whose religion is right and start extracting wisdom from all of them. We become the bridge between earth and heaven that these light beings have always been. Comment, illuminate, and share this video with someone ready for this perspective. What's been your most profound spiritual experience? Smash that like button and subscribe. We're just getting started uncovering these mysteries together.